Ayan, good afternoon teachers and welcome to our Saturday stream, no, our regular stream for our March series. So welcome and thank you so much once again for joining us, no, in this very hot weather, no, here in the Philippines, no. And I hope that you're all safe. No, please do hydrate, teachers. Okay, it's very hot, it's very humid. Okay, and please stay at home for the meantime, so that you avoid any incidents, no, or heat stroke outside of your homes or the comforts of your homes. Okay, but before we start, teachers, okay, and I'm sweating. No, you can see I'm sweating right now. Please do share our link for today, no, and so that we can invite more teachers, no, in our stream for today, because definitely our session for today is packed with information, with new learnings, no, about equitable education or the equity cycle. And I'm equally excited because while I've heard about this topic for quite some time, no, it's always been being misinterpreted. It's being misused by some educators, no, or by some institutions or schools. And here in our session for today, our speaker will clarify that aspect of the equity cycle. And we get to want to learn more no about this concept or idea. Okay, and of course our speaker is not new no to the community. She actually held no one session couple of months ago here at KTS. But before we start, teachers, I'd like to greet everyone first. A good afternoon, especially those that are live viewers for today. I understand that we're a little bit fewer than usual today because one, I know that our teachers are so busy in preparing for the possible face-to-face or actually face-to-face encounters in here for the fourth quarter or for the last stretch of our school year 2021 2022. So good luck for all of those teachers. But of course, those that cannot attend today no, in our live session, you're always welcome and free to view this session in a replay mode. No, it's going to be available here at our YouTube channel. Okay, so let me first greet our teachers in the chat. Okay, of course, no, our always no, our early bird in the chat, no, Teacher Jeffrey Beltran came, Teacher Benbury Cricks, who's waiting for his girlfriend or Joa, okay, and of course, Teacher Annie Rose, okay, good afternoon, Teacher RM, Teacher Gemma Rivera, okay, Teacher Mia May Kibuyen, Teacher Arnie Pagulayan, Teacher Joy Grace Agatep, Teacher Ronnie Ediano. By the way, Teacher Ronnie, thank you so much for your suggestion. We'll be taking note of that no and implementing your suggestion next series no for our April series. Teacher Glenda Aloran, Teacher Roxanne Altea Fernandez, Teacher Kakulitan Moment ni Sasalab, and Teacher Joseph Odelon Hermitanyo, no, Teacher Carol Sombria, and Teacher Juela Giriba. Okay, Pastor Manny Garcia, thank you so much for always blessing no our community. Teacher of course, to Dr. Desiree Alexander, who's also in the chat, Teacher Regina Rose Regidor, Teacher Sheila Ocampo, Teachers Andy Padernelia, Teacher L. Bayasen, Teacher Taban Rodel, Teacher Kim Rara, Teacher Karen Ayodok, Teacher Charis Lobiano, Teacher May Versosa. Teacher May, congratulations once again for your sharing in the Kahoot community, as well as congratulations on your upcoming webinar for the University of Baguio. Sobrang nakakatuwa po yung pag-share din po ng ating mga teachers. Teacher Da Masinas, Teacher Manny Romeroso, Teacher Maria Celina Botyong, Teacher ULS Genly Grace Pascua, Teacher Rowena Contapay, and of course to all our live viewers no at malapit na rin pa Teacher Cara May Ramos, Teacher Beverly Joy Quahao, Teacher Ruth Claribel Bellaseran, Teacher Winnie May Lorente, Teacher Lanter Cupido, Teacher Sheila Ocampo. Good afternoon and magandang hapon po sa ating lahat no, who are here in our session for today. Okay, so teachers, okay, before we start, no, so that our speaker will also have some sort of like context also and gauge, no, and as she talks about the equity cycle, okay, can we also share, okay, before our session start, no, can we share in the chat, teachers, okay, your brief understanding, your brief knowledge, no, or whatever you know about equitable education or the equity cycle, okay? And let's put that in the chat. And also, you may want to include as well, why is it important to talk about the equity cycle? Why is it important to talk about equitability in education? Okay, so that's so that our speaker for today, no, will also have something to base on her discussion as well, no, in the context of Philippines and in the context of Filipino educators. Okay. So teachers, let's not anymore prolong, okay, this this introduction, okay, and let's get into our session for today. Okay, so let me first introduce. No, it is my honor, of course, to introduce our speaker for today. Okay, and let me just read this citation, the biography or of our speaker for today. Okay, so let's our speaker for today, Dr. Desiree Alexander Kim, is an award-winning multi-degreed educator who has been in the educational field since 2002. She is the founder CEO of Educator Alexander Consulting, LLC, and the regional director of North Louisiana for the Associated Professional Educators of Louisiana. She consults with members of several schools, businesses, and presents at conferences globally. Dr. Alexander is a lifetime certified in Louisiana in secondary English education, as a reading specialist, as a school librarian, as an educational technology facilitator, as an educational technology leader, and in educational leadership. She is a certified in Texas as a principal in English language arts and reading for grades 4 to 8 and grades 8 to 12. As a reading specialist for grades EC to 12 and as a school librarian. She holds multiple technology certifications, including but not limited to IC3 certification, Google Certified Trainer and Innovator, Apple Teacher, and Microsoft Innovative Educator, Trainer, and Expert. She holds a bachelor, a master's plus 30, and an education specialist degree in curriculum instruction from Louisiana State University, a Master of Library Science from Texas Women's University, and a Master of Educational Leadership with a concentration in Educational Technology Leadership from Nichols State University. She also holds a doctorate in education with a concentration in educational leadership from Lamar University. Let us welcome into our stream our speaker for today, Dr. Alexander. Hey, Dr. Desiree, Dr. Desiree, good afternoon. Good morning on your end, by the way.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be back today.
Yes, definitely, Dr. Alexander. We're also equally excited, especially the really great and amazing session that you gave last time on digital education. And this time, we're following it up with equity cycle. We are very excited. But maybe, Dr. Alexander, before we start with your session and before you bring us into this deeper and maybe in a way, demystifying the equity cycle, can you please do give us like a short, brief, an overview of what our discussion will contain or will have for today?
Sure. So we're going to be talking about the equity cycle. So that's not the kind of official name. It's just one of those things where we hear a lot of buzzwords. So we hear equity, we hear DEI, we hear diversity, we hear inclusion. But not many people are discussing like what that really means and then how it looks in education. So we're going to have a discussion. And so definitely I'm glad you were putting things in the chat and I'm looking at them and reading them. So, we do want this to be discussion based. So we're going to look a little bit deeper at ourselves as people, at ourselves as educators, and at how the decisions we make affect our students.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander, and we're excited. Okay, so maybe we could let's start with our session. So while Dr. Alexander is sharing her presentation, teachers, please be reminded that this is a certified session. She'll be getting a certificate, but make sure that you accomplish our evaluation form at the end of the session. Okay. So good luck, Dr. Alexander. I'll be in the chat. I'll also be engaging our audience. Okay. And teachers, enjoy the session. Please engage. No? And of course, put your insights, questions in the chat as well. Okay. So your presentation is on already, Dr. Alexander. I can see it.
Yes, thank you so much. So let's hop in talking about the equity cycle. So I am Dr. Desiree Alexander, and Franco gave me such a good introduction. I really have nothing else to say about myself. So thank you so much for that. But I started my career as a 6th grade and 8th grade English teacher here in the United States, and then became a high school English teacher, a middle school librarian, a high school librarian, and then a district level instructional and technology supervisor. So that's been my 20 years in education so far. And now I'm doing consulting full time, and I am the deputy director now for an educational nonprofit here in Louisiana in the United States. So very happy to be back with you today. These are all of the different ways that you can contact me. So you see my Twitter handle, my website, my email. If you have questions, I would love to continue this conversation. I'm also throwing that in the chat. So it's a link where you can go to subscribe to my newsletter and, find me. Because again, I would love to continue this conversation. So those are all of the ways you can contact me. And here are the resources. So that link is also in the chat for those that are watching live or that may watch the recording if you can see the chat. But I'm just going to leave this up just for a second so you can either write that down or go ahead and go to it to bookmark it. But it's a place where you can get resources, and the list of resources are constantly updated. So I usually don't give out this presentation, but a lot of the graphics, the information, the links in the presentation are on that resource link. So there you go. So again, I'll just leave this up just for a second. And please do use the chat for our discussions, for questions, for comments. We're going to dig a little bit deeper in ourselves today. And yes, it is 1 a.m. in the morning here. But it's also not very hot. So I heard Franco talking about how like very, very, very hot it is. So it's kind of cool here. So we're good. Okay. So hopefully you've gotten that, and I will be constantly putting it in the chat. So first thing I want to do is look at 2 pieces of art, 2 poems that were written about different topic, but it's a nice introduction into equity. So sometimes I don't have time to have a discussion because we're kind of rushing through the content. So I love that today we can have a little bit of a discussion. So I want you to go ahead and read this poem, and we're gonna discuss a little bit. I want you to put in the chat, what does this poem say to you? What line in the poem do you relate to the most? So as you're reading this by Paul Lawrence Dunbar, I want you to put in the chat, is there a line that really speaks to you? Is there, does this touch you in any way? I know to start off the discussion, and thank you I'm seeing some stuff come in. Please continue. I know one that really, really speaks to me is the second stanza, and is, why should the world be overwise and counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. And it's one of those things where I have to stop and think to myself, am I wearing a mask? I think we all wear a mask in some shape or form to get through life, to get through the day. And what mask are we wearing? Why are we wearing those masks? And then, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is it a survival thing? Should we not let the world see all of our tears and sighs? Or is that hurting us by not letting them see our tears and sighs? Is it a strength thing? So it's one of those things, it causes a lot of questions. I want to look in the chat for some. We continue to thrive despite our difficulties with a hopeful heart. We tend to cover ourselves just to belong and not to be judged. Why should the world be over? Oh yeah, so that same Christian. We wear the mask to hide our imperfections just to impress others, but as the song goes, show your true self. So beautiful. It's a really nice way to get us in the frame of mind of equity. And this is one of my it's not one of it's my absolute favorite poem from when I read it, in middle school to now. It just, every time I read it, something else comes up. So we have one more that I want you to read, because when we're speaking about this, we do want to try to create a brave space, a space where you can talk and you can say, this is how I'm feeling about what you just said. So you would usually hear safe space, but we're going to look at this poem and talk about, is there such a thing as a safe space? So again, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. Read over this. Tell me what line you identify with and what this brings out in you in the chat. Okay, so as your answers are coming in, and again, thank you so much for this. Is going to be a participating type of session, so thank you for participating. And if I say anyone's name's wrong, please forgive me. I do like to make sure that I say everyone's name correctly. But Rowena, that is also my favorite line. We all carry scars, and we have all caused wounds. It's one of those things that I say. We've all been the hero and the villain in somebody's story. No matter how good you try to be, you're the villain in somebody's story. Whether it's valid or not, whether you've done something or not, you are the villain in somebody's story. You have caused wounds. It may just be you won the award instead of that other person, right? And you didn't mean to cause any, but we have all caused wounds, and we all carry the scars of people that have intentionally caused us wounds and unintentionally caused us wounds. Some wounds that we've created ourselves, right? So beautiful. That's my favorite line as well. So let me look at some of the comments and read some of these. We will not be perfect is a line that I think humanizes us and acknowledges our flaws, yet we continue to be better. Oh, love it, love it, love it. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. I love that too. Love it, love it. Yes, agreeing. No matter what we do, we are the villain in someone else's story. It's just how life works. I think equity is something that we get to better understand through conversations and understanding it as a community. I completely agree with that. Together, we will create a brave space, because there is no such thing as a safe space. So thank you for pointing that out, because if you think about it, you're like, we're going to have a safe space. Well, safe for who? Who says that this is a safe space? If one person doesn't feel safe, is it a safe space? Do they feel safe enough to say it's not a safe space? Right? So a brave space is saying, hey, we're going to be brave enough to be honest and truthful about where we are and where we want to be. We're going to leave it open to talk about misconceptions, to talk about racism, to talk about sexism, to talk about homosexuality, homophobia, to talk about, all of these things. We're going to keep it as a brave space. So love, love, love this. Thank you for participating. And I did love that for the other poem, somebody pointed out the line, and I just had to go back to it because I thought it was awesome. They pointed out the line of, we smile. With torn and bleeding hearts, we smile. So even though our hearts are torn and bleeding, we're still projecting that smile. I was like, yes, 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 yes. Okay, so thank you for participating. Keep it up. Keep the conversation. I want you to keep talking in the chat. Okay, keep that conversation going. So let's start looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we hear DEI a lot. Like, we have to be focused on DEI. Some people don't even know what DEI means, but we keep using it as a buzzword. So DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So these are kind of the textbook Webster definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity, you have differing elements coming together. Okay. So when we think of diversity, a lot of times we only think about race, and that is definitely a disservice. Can we think about diversity without thinking about race? No. But if you're only thinking about that, it does do a disservice. And, we're not going to get into, this is kind of a, we can talk about this for 3, 4, 5 months, right? Or even years. But, that race is a social construct anyway, right? We made that up. But it's composed of different elements. Equity, freedom from bias, and favoritism. We all have a bias, and we're going to talk about, we all have multiple biases, and we're going to talk about bias a little bit later today, but we all have a freedom. Equity is the freedom from bias or favoritism, and inclusion is you are included. What I want you to think about is, let's put an educational spin on it. Let's put an educational lens on it. Oh, sorry. And I want you to think about these questions. Think about your campus. Think about your school systems. Think about your districts. Who is being included and why? So when you're thinking about inclusion, it's not just who has a seat at the table, but why do they have a seat at the table? If I am just a checklist item for you, is that satisfactory? Do I actually have a seat at the table if you're not listening to what I'm saying? I always like to say, if you give me a seat at the table, but you don't listen to me, then you just told me to have a seat. Right? I don't have a seat at the table. I'm just sitting down. So who is being included and why are they being included? What are they bringing to this group? What's the purpose of them being there? Equity. What access does each person have individually to succeed? The only way you can answer that question is if you know your people. If you're a teacher, if you know your students. If you're a leader, if you know your staff. If you know your faculty, if you know your teachers. So I can't answer what you need to succeed if I don't talk to you, if I don't know you, if I don't ask you, right? Another thing I like to say is, you can't help someone and tell them to shut up at the same time. And I've absolutely had those experiences. Well, something will happen and someone's like, oh, I'm going to step up for you. And I'm like, but I got it. I'm like, well, that's not, you can't help me and tell me to be quiet at the same time. Okay. So what does each person need to succeed? And then inclusion, who is not being included and why are they not being included? One of the main things that I hear about not including people are excuses. They're just straight excuses. Well, I don't know any people that are outside of my race to include. I don't know where they are. I don't know how to get them. Well, that means you need to broaden your circle. That means you need to do some research, right? Just sitting there and going, it's not going to solve the problem. That means you need to take a deeper look at yourself and go, okay, well, why don't I? I need to do better at that. Okay. Well, we don't have any differently abled people because, I don't know where to find people that, may be in a wheelchair. I don't know. We don't have ramps anyway. Excuses. Why don't we have people of different religions? Why don't we have people of different economic backgrounds? Why don't we have people from different locations? right? Because they're going to all bring a different perspective, and that's what we need to make decisions. Because no group is homogeneous, and no classroom and no school is. So each and every person thinks differently. So that's what we want to start thinking about. So let's do a deeper dive. Equity and equality. So when I first heard of equity, some many years ago, I was kind of offended. I was like, wait, what do you mean equity? Like, we have fought for equality, especially being African American in the United States, in the South. We have fought for equality. What are you talking about? What is this new thing? And it was new to me, of course, not new to life. But, I was like, no, it's equality. And they were trying to explain what equity was, and I just wasn't hearing it. I was like, no, go somewhere with that. And then this picture, I saw this picture, and it did start helping me. And this is like years later that I saw this picture, and it started helping me understand a little bit what equity was. So where equality, everyone gets the same thing, right? But I want you to put in the chat, and thank you for the conversation that's continuing. I want you to put in the chat, what is the assumption that equality makes? Okay, put that in the chat. What is the assumption that equality makes? So equality says, hey, we're going to give everybody the same thing so we can all, do what we need to do. Equity says, hey, each person is different. Each person has strengths. Each person has weaknesses. Whether those strengths and weaknesses are from self or from institutional, or from institutions, we all need some type of help. So equity says, okay, well, I'm going to give each person what they need to level the playing field. So you see like the little boxes. So there you go. The tall guy didn't need a box. So that's next thing I want you to throw in the chat is what can be better about this picture? What can be more inclusive about this picture? Is there anything that you don't like or see or have a question about this picture? So let's see if we have anyone that answered the first question while you're answering the second question. What does equality assume? So equality assumes that we get the same thing. Equality misses the point of where each person is coming from. The reality is that they're different spaces providing different outcomes, and on the alternative breaks, we should be balancing both. So we're talking about the different scenarios. Perfect. Equality assumes that we're all coming from the same place. Equality assumes that we're all starting at the same place. If we give everyone the same thing, but somebody's starting 25 miles ahead of the other person, is that equal? And you can say, but we gave everybody the same thing, but we all didn't need the same thing. We're all not starting from the same place. So that's when you're going to look at equality. So when you're looking at this picture, I see remove the fence. Yes, remove the divisions. Yes. Now, another thing with this picture, they're all presumably, just by looking from the back, they're all male. It looks like they're all the same race. At least they're all the exact same skin tone, right? They're all brown. Black and brown people, they're all brown. So it's assuming a lot, right? It's assuming a lot. Is missing a lot. One of the detrimental lies I think that is told is that equity is for Black and brown people. There's a bunch of people who are not, under the equity umbrella. So it's not just Black and brown people who need a box. Okay. So let's stop that kind of just flat out lie. Or who get a box, right? So let's stop that flat out lie. So let's look at another picture. So this came out, it's an article called Food for Thought, Equality versus Equity versus Justice. So notice how they changed the picture. We have presumably a female in the mix now. We have different races, different skin tones, and we have the equality picture, we have the equity picture, but now we have what's called the justice picture, where they are working on removing the fence. But the fence is still not down. This is what I call the Band-Aid effect. So we really like putting Band-Aids on stuff because it makes us feel better. Even if there's a gaping wound, we still put a nice little Band-Aid on it, and it makes us feel like we've done something. Poking holes through the fence is the Band-Aid effect. Oh, well, you know what? Let me make it easier for you to... I'm not taking down this fence, but let me make it easier for you to see. Band-Aid effect, right? I don't want to talk about why you're not in the game. I don't want to talk about why you're not in the stands. I don't want to talk about why we need that division, like someone said in the chat. Like, why do we need that? I don't want to talk about all that. I'm just going to poke some holes in it, and that makes me feel like I've accomplished something. Now, have I accomplished something? Yeah, you took a step, but we need to go deeper, right? That's the only way we're going to fix society is if we dig deeper and we start looking at the root cause of why things are happening. It's one of those things where, at least in the United States, when the pandemic happened, we started hearing people say, well, students need to be in school in person. And why? Well, students need to be in school because that is the only place where they get food and they can eat. Students need to be in school because for some of our students, that is the only safe space or even brave space that they have. Students need to be in school because that's where we can catch abuse and things happening in the home. Okay, is that true for some of our students? Absolutely. Big capital letters, absolutely. But why aren't we talking about why our kids have to come to school to eat? Why aren't we talking about why our students have to come to school to get a safe space? We don't want to talk about that because then we have to talk about larger issues. Then we have to talk about wage gaps, and then we have to talk about, so we don't want to go too deep into it. We just want that Band-Aid to make us feel better. And when that Band-Aid was ripped off, we were like, well, what do we do now? Because we still don't want to talk and go deeper. So rethinking the deep dive itself. So we're back to kind of the original picture, which we're just going to deal with. But my friend Ken Shelton, who speaks on equity a whole bunch, sent me this one when we were having an equity discussion. And I was like, okay, now we have liberation and transformation. So for liberation, the fence is finally gone, right? We took away the barrier. Now they're still there on the outskirts. Okay. They're not in the stands. They're not in the game. They're still where they were, but we took away that barrier. And then I love that transformation is kind of blank because we don't even know where we can go from here, right? We don't know what transformation actually looks like. Racism, sexism, homophobia, religious persecution is so ingrained in some of our cultures that I don't even think we would recognize our culture if it was missing. So anytime someone gets mad because someone says, I want my life to matter, that's a problem. So I want us to start thinking and start analyzing. You can either answer this in the chat or you can just think about it to yourself. And I am going to get to some of the comments. Thank you again for participating in the chat. So I want to get to some of the comments that I've been missing. But I want you to start thinking, what practices are in place or are needed? Because sometimes when I first started doing this presentation, I would ask, well, what practices are in place? And some of my teachers would get really sad and go, none. So I kind of changed it to, what practices are in place or are needed in your classroom, library, school, district to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion are being considered. Just that they're being thought about, that they're being considered. And what accountability is in place to ensure that it's being implemented. So we have so many accountability measures in education, right? Then if that's the case, then we also need to be accountable for DEI. Where are the accountability measures to make sure that this is being implemented, that this is being considered and included and, done effectively? Not just that you hire a person in a position to be your DEI queen and king. How is this being implemented? So if you want to answer this in the chat, please do. If you just want to think about it to yourself, that is completely okay. I'm just going to take a little break here, and I want to see some of the comments that we have in the chat. Equality assumes everyone receives the opportunity or privilege, but the outcome shows unequal. Assumptions hinder equality. Assumptions kill education. Yes, Ms. White. Assumptions hinder equality, misdiagnosing the causes of inequity, and propping up ineffective strategies that seem like good ideas. That should be on a t-shirt. Like it'll be really small, but I still think we can put it on a t-shirt. Love it, love it, love it, love it. When we seek a just world, we remove any systemic barriers to inequity. Love it. Assumptions distort how we think about the reality and hinder us to address the issues. Yes. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. So we have a comment. We work closely with our student data center to consider specialized programs for students with particular needs. Beautiful. Thank you for that. Okay. So now we're going to talk about bias. So like I said before, we all have biases. We're not all racist, we're not all sexist, that kind of thing, but we all have a bias. We all say, you know what? I don't like that person because of fill in the blank, right? Because of something that they usually can't really help or don't have any effect on. So the thing with biases is once we realize what it is, we can start working on it and we can start recognizing it and we can start changing it. But I want to go deeper for educators, anybody in a service profession, right? Because we are teaching the next generation. We are affecting generations of people. So what I want us to consider is BDA. How does your bias, because we all have them, it's not enough to just check, oh, look at all the biases I have. How does your bias determine your actions? How does your bias determine how you treat those students? How does your bias determine how you treat those parents? How does your bias determine how you treat the rest of the staff? Okay. That's what I want us to think about in education. And I think every service profession needs to think of not just how am I biased, but how is my bias actually playing out when I'm interacting with these people that I, have power over or control over, or just that I'm trying to actually help. That's what I want you to think about. Okay, how's your bias determining those actions? And the thing is sometimes it's an ugly place that we have to go in ourselves when we start thinking about, well, yeah, I'm doing better now, but my bias definitely determined this action. I think about when I was in the classroom. I know how my biases determined some of my actions, and it wasn't okay. What I would challenge you with is if those people, if those students, if those adults are still around you, and if they're still, reachable, you need to apologize. Okay? Because guess what? You were the villain in their story. And if you can affect that, if you can cause some type of healing in that, that's what you need to do. It's not an easy conversation. It's not going to be an easy conversation. And one of the things when the pandemic happened, people were emailing me and, private messaging me on Twitter and things. We had so many conversations. And, they would say, I just feel so bad. I just feel so helpless. I was part of the problem. And I would say, you need to start from today. Okay. We can't get bogged down with thinking about all, the past. We have to start from today. However, you still need to be accountable for your actions. Okay. So, and this is not La La Land. This is the real world. Just like the Brave Space poem said, so you still have, you are still accountable. Even if you didn't know better, you're still accountable for your actions. So do understand that. And another thing that I would hear is, Desiree, I tried to apologize and they didn't accept it. So I don't know what to do. And I would stop and go, let's talk about what you just said. Because if you apologize for them to accept it, then you didn't apologize. And some wanted to hear it, some didn't. One thing you will always get with me is honesty. Okay? So you don't apologize for the other person to accept it. You apologize because you did something wrong. So it's not on me to accept your apology. It's not on me to make you feel better because you caused real pain. But it is on you to apologize because you did something wrong. Okay. So think about your BDA. How does your bias determine your actions? And then stop it, right? Once you know better, you do better. So when you start seeing like, ooh, I just treated that person, I wouldn't have treated the other person like that. I need to correct my own behavior. I love this wheel. So what I want you to do while I'm going through the will, feel, skill, and again, all of this is on your resource sheet. I'm gonna put the link in the chat again for the resource sheet and to follow me on Twitter and all that good stuff. So I want you to think about these questions and put some answers in the chat while I'm going through the will. What assumptions, that's that word again, assumptions kill education. What assumptions do educators make about students based on cultural and learning differences? How does this affect digital learning in classrooms? And what policies and cultural norms exist in education that create, reward, and maintain a racial hierarchy? Let that sit with you while I'm going through my will and start putting some answers in the chat. Oh, I love all these comments. Thank you so much. Will, feel, and skill. So the desire to lead. Kind of, how do we start on this cycle, right? How do we start getting better? So will, becoming self-aware. So that's, taking a deep dive, looking at yourself and going, okay, what biases do I have? How do they determine my actions? Who have I hurt in my life? Oh my goodness, yeah, that I said that and that was just not okay. Like even if the person didn't hear it, that wasn't okay for me to say. And I'm saying all this, y'all, and I'm thinking of instances in my teaching career that I can pinpoint for all of that. Okay. Examine the system's impact on families and students, not just your impact, but what is your system's impact on the families and students? Because sometimes we say, well, I can only change my part, which is true. And hopefully changing your part will help change the larger system. But you also need to say, well, how is the larger system treating our parents and our families and our students? Because you need to acknowledge that and start examining that. It's not just you that's affecting them. Believe all students will learn. Notice it doesn't say can learn. If you're still saying like all students can learn, well, no, really? Like for real, right? So of course all students can learn, But when you say all students will learn, it puts the responsibility on the adult. When you say all students can learn, it puts the responsibility on the student. Understanding that all people have a unique worldview. I don't care if you have twins. Everyone has their unique worldview. So understanding that no group is homogenous, just because you read a book about Muslim people does not mean you understand all Muslim people. Like, just like no group is homogenous. So understanding that every single person has a unique worldview. All of us have our own lenses that we're looking at the world through. Standing up to prejudice and discrimination. So that's when you start talking about anti-racist versus I am not a racist. When you say I am not a racist, you're saying I am not going to participate in racist activities. Okay, so if someone says a racial slur, I'm not going to participate in that. I'm not going to stand up to it, but I'm not going to participate in it. When you say you're anti-racist, that's when you're talking about standing up to prejudice and discrimination. If I hear it, I'm going to say something about it. If I see it, I'm going to fight against it. That's anti-racist versus I am not a racist. It's about the action behind it. I would say, especially when you're in a room of people who look and think like you, right? Especially when you don't feel like you have to stand up to prejudice and racism and discrimination. I feel like that's where the true test comes in. Are you going to say something? Knowing the community. You can't help people that you don't know. Accepting institutional responsibility. I think that's where in the United States we're hung up on right now, is we have a lot of people who deny the institutional responsibility of a lot of things that are happening right now. They're like, well, no. It's all about the individual person. Well, no, there's institutional bias. There's institutional racism. But a lot of people don't want to see that. And then teach curriculum that respects students' culture. We're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get into the practical steps. But one thing that I like about this wheel is notice it doesn't stop, right? So once you get to the you're becoming self-aware again. And isn't that the truth, right? This is not a destination. We're not like trying to get to, this is a circular thing. Because once I find one bias, there's probably another one right behind it. And then there's something else I can get better at. I know the most recent thing I was taught was tribe. We were like, oh, we're the Google tribe and you're in my tribe. And they were like, please, you got to stop saying that. Because in the Native American culture, that is a real thing. It's not just like a word that you throw around. And I was like, oh my goodness, thank you. Thank you. So it's one of those things like we are constantly learning. We're constantly trying to be better. But it's just being open to doing it. That's where the wheel starts. Becoming self-aware. Going, yeah, I have some stuff to learn and I'm going to continue to learn. Right? So let me get some answers from our chat before we go into the practical. Not to say this is all not practical, but like what can I do in the classroom to help? All right, I'm going to scroll up. Educators must not only be able to recognize the differences in race, gender, class, ethnicity, and other social identities among their students, but also adjust their approach to teaching. Love it. Recognize it and adjust. Love it. Love it. Becoming aware of biases. In order to address our biases, we must first identify them. However, most people are unaware of those they have towards and against certain groups. Absolutely. Right. The whole like, I'm colorblind. I'm the, oh my gosh. Stop it. Okay. No. Okay. Because if I get into that, it's gonna be another 30 minutes of talking about that. So we're not gonna talk about that. Make sure that that what we teach meets a student where they are, including how those identities and experiences shape how they learn. Love it. Rather than seeing it as a problem or something I have to manage, right? I'm a big supporter. I sound like I like give millions of dollars, but I support it used to be called teach tolerance, but I always hated the word tolerance. Because if you really think about it, it's like, so you're just tolerating me, right? You're just like, oh, I'm dealing with you. But of course, they're learning for justice now. So I'm so happy that when they changed the title, because I was like, I hate the title tolerance. So that brought that to mind, that word, like I'm tolerating you. You're not a problem, but oh. Yes, I agree with your topic. We'll hit the pride of Filipinos. This is going to be very difficult, but we need to face our biases as we grow. Beautiful. All right, so I'm gonna continue. Oh, so many good comments. Implicit bias describes automatic associations that influence behavior, making people respond in biased ways, even when they are not explicitly prejudiced. Love it. Okay, so culturally responsive teaching. So when we start talking about, okay, how do we take all of this that we talked about and put it into the classroom, put it into education? Now, of course, like I said, we're like right here on the umbrella, right? Because there's so many more topics that we can talk about, but this is a nice introduction to the equity cycle. So Dr. Gloria Latson Billings is amazing. She has, of course, books and articles and speeches that she does, and you can find a lot of those on YouTube. Sometimes you'll find like the whole hour speech, but you can also find it like cut down, and she just breaks it down. I love the way she kind of pulls it all together and talks about critical race theory and how that's not something we're teaching in K through 12 anyway, but culturally responsive teaching is. So she says that all students must have opportunities to examine and critique the status quo, have academic success, and develop cultural competence. So let's look at these three things and look at how do we bring all of this into our classroom practically. Examine and critique the status quo. So while I'm going through some of our bullets, I want you to look at this picture and tell me, do you see anything wrong with it? So put that in the chat. Do you see anything wrong with this picture? So when we are examining and critiquing the status quo, you have to be open for discussion. This is not something you can just be like, do better and just move on with life. Like, you have to be open for your students to be able to discuss. Now, one of the things happening, at least in the United States right now, is that discussion is being suppressed. We don't want to talk about any differences. We want to talk about, similarities. We want to talk about everyone is the same. And that's just not life, right? And that's just not the world that we live in. So saying be open for discussion, some of my teachers really get, a heartache and go, well, I'm trying, but I also want to keep my job, right? I also want to, feed my kids. So it's one of those things where you have to sometimes think about how to open the discussion. I may not bring it up, but I have ways to have my students bring it up, right? I may not bring up that topic, but I have ways that I can do an open-ended question where my students are going to bring it up and have that discussion. So being open to that discussion, facilitate, don't dominate. This is not the time to tell 50 stories about your life. Even if you have stories that fit into the discussion, this is your students' discussion. It's not yours. Don't dominate. Facilitate. Make sure it doesn't get ugly. Make sure that it stays on track, right? But when I say make sure it doesn't get ugly, you also want to be prepared to talk about misconceptions. Because somebody's going to say a stereotype. Somebody's going to say, well, I don't know why, blah, 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 blah. And don't shut that. Don't go, oh my God, no. No, be open. Okay, well, let's discuss that. Where did that come from? Why do we think that way? Right? Be open to talking about those misconceptions. Well, I don't know why people have to talk about blah, blah, blah. Well, let's talk about that. Okay. Is that part of there? Do you not want to talk about your own identity? Do you never want to talk about yourself? Are you leaving pieces of yourself, on the table because you don't want? So be open to talk about those misconceptions. So I'm going to stop here and see if you said that you saw anything wrong with this picture. Students will draw the face based on the emotions. Okay. I'm observing if someone will react gotcha. I think this is an activity. Oh yeah, this is in a book. So this is in a student workbook. And you draw the faces to match the feelings. But let's see. Being happy is determined materialistically. Do cakes and party matter? Never even thought about that, but okay. I like that mindset. So this activity is good for motivation with young kids. Okay. So did anybody notice that the two positive words go with a wider skin color? And the two negative words go with a darker skin color. Happy and proud, sad and angry. So did anyone notice that? Also, there's a very prominent stereotype of the angry Black woman. So that kind of fits this picture, right? Angry. So I want you to think about, and then we'll go through the rest of the bullets. If a student, and you don't have to answer this in the chat unless you want to, if a student saw this in your classroom, if you're a classroom teacher, would they feel comfortable telling you that they're uncomfortable with this? So if they saw what I see and what Marianne sees, would they feel comfortable coming to you and telling you about it? If your teacher saw this, so you were in a staff meeting and your teacher's open to this book, this page, and they're like, if they saw this and saw a problem with it, would they be comfortable telling you about it? That tells you a lot about, do you have a brave space? Okay. Because I've had a lot of teachers who go, no, I don't think they would tell me. Or yeah, I think they would definitely say something. So that tells you about the relationship. That tells you about, do I need to do better in my classroom? Do I need to do better at my school? With opening these kind of conversations up where they would feel okay saying, can we look at this for a second? Can we examine this status quo that we have going on here? Just because it's printed in a book doesn't mean it's right. So thank you for the like, oh, that's not a good vibe. Yeah, I agree. That is so odd. Yeah. So be prepared to talk about those misconceptions, because somebody may raise their hand and go, well, every Black woman I've met have been angry. Okay, let's talk about that stereotype, right? So if every Black woman that you've met has been angry, well, how has every white woman that you've met been? How has every Hispanic woman that you've met been? How has every Filipino woman that you've met been? Because they may say, well, they're all angry. Okay, well, then you have a problem with women. Right? Like, it's just like, let's get to the root cause of what's going on here. But have those Black women been any more angrier than or what was happening when they were angry? So let's talk about the misconceptions and the danger of the single story, the danger of you taking one person and making them represent their entire group. Okay. So allow space for students to make connections between now and then and examine and critique. Allow that space for them to go, okay, we're looking at primary resources, but why do we have these primary resources and not their primary resources? Did they not exist at the same time? Right? Well, this is just like what's happening on the news, huh? Like, aren't we repeating it? Let them make those. That's called critical thinking. Okay, and if they're not making those connections, leave it. Like, what do you think about this? Does this sound familiar? Like, start helping them critique. Because if more adults would do this, we wouldn't be in some of the situations that we're in where people just blindly follow people, right? They would go, I have a question about what was just said. Okay. Discuss how to fight and change and what their role is in the fight and change. So, what this is don't leave your students hanging. Okay. If you're going to bring up these kind of conversations, if you're going to bring up historical aspects, if you're going to bring up current events, you always want to talk about what is my role in this? How can I help? I don't care if they're a 4-year-old or a 20-year-old. How can I help? You want to give them an active role in the change. You want to give them an active role in the fight. And I shouldn't say give them. You want to lead them to what is their active role in it. Empower them to say, you know what? I can change it. If I'm a 4-year-old, I can change it by sharing. I can change it by being nice, even when I'm angry. I can change, so it's just, depending on their age range and their maturity level, where are they in it? Because if you don't do that, then just like some of us as adults, when we don't want to get out of bed because something's happening on the news that's just so not depressing, like it, like not like, oh, I'm depressed, I can't believe, but it's just so like I feel so helpless because there's nothing I can do to fix or to help the situation. Well, imagine how our students are feeling. Okay, we're adults and we feel like, what can I do? So imagine how your students. So we want to give them a time to discuss and to find out, like, where do I fit in this? One of the things I used to teach a civil rights unit, and we would talk about the Holocaust, we would talk about the civil rights movement in the United States, we would talk about hate crimes and hate groups. And at the end, we would do an anti-bullying campaign, and it was called It All Starts With Me. So that was there. What can I do about all this stuff, Miss Alexander? Because I was Miss Alexander then. What can I, like, okay, what can I do? Well, it all starts with not liking somebody, right? Because of something that they usually can't change. It all starts with hate. So what you can do is, let's look at our actions as teenagers and as preteens, and let's look at bullying, and let's look at how we treat people. Let's look at how we stand on the sidelines and see people treating people. And so it helped them understand, okay, well, this is my role that I can fix and I can do right now. And I love this status quo bias. Would you like a shovel? But I'm already using this spoon. And that's what a lot of us, when we say, we've always done it this way, doesn't mean it's right. Okay, it doesn't mean it's the most effective. It doesn't mean it makes sense. It doesn't mean it's right. Just because you're using the spoon doesn't mean that makes sense anymore. So having academic success, your students have to feel like they can succeed. And you'll be surprised how many students do not feel that. And when I say surprise, you may think in your classroom, well, yeah, everybody feels like they can succeed. And you'll be surprised, but at 1 or 2 or 3 students who are like, I'm just here, like, that because they don't see that academic success. And success, in my opinion, is one of those loaded words. What does success look like? Success can be different for different people, right? So even that word, let's break that down as a class. What does success look like? Having high expectations for students, checking those assumptions. Assumptions can kill education. I know I keep saying that, but it's just one of those things where, I've had teachers come up to me and go, well, Johnny's acting like that because, his mom is on crack and he's dealing with it. So, that's just the way he acts. Excuse me? You are assuming a lot Number one. Number two, you're excusing a lot. And that's not going to help Johnny in the future, because the cops are not going to go, well, Johnny, he steals stuff. That's just kind of what he does. No, right? So we need to start teaching Johnny that, hey, we understand, we have empathy that you're going through these things. We're going to help where we can. But what you're doing and how you're taking that and acting out with it is not going to fly. We have to get you some help. Okay, we have to start teaching you how to take that and do whatever you need to do to it to not express it in that way. If we don't do it, who's going to do it? And then we sit back when something happens to Johnny later and go, oh, yep, I knew it. Excuse me, if you knew it, what did you do to try to help? Besides excusing his behavior. I used to tell my students, you shouldn't get mad at the teachers who are keeping you in line. You should get mad at the ones who aren't. That's the ones you should be offended by. The teachers who are just like, well, that's just how they... Okay, while you're acting a fool, you need to raise your hand and go, wait, do you not think I can act better than this? Do you not think I can do better than this? That's who you should get offended by, because the teachers who are keeping you in line are telling you you can do better, and I'm gonna force it out of you. Okay. I also used to tell them, just because you act good around me, if you don't act good around others, then I don't teach you anything. And then we're going, Miss A, we don't act like that in your class, because no, that's not an excuse. Because if I'm teaching you right, then you're going to know how to act wherever you go. So that just tells me that you're just pretending when you're with me. No. Right? So kind of teaching them those real life things can help check those assumptions and have high expectations for your students. Have students interact with content. And this is one of those things where I think we're losing it more and more in education, is taking the time to have your students struggle. Taking the time to have them actually interact with the things that you're teaching them. Not just like, teach it, grade it, assess it, done. Teach it, assess it, grade it, done. Teaching it. No. Where's my time to interact? Where's my time to go, wait, I don't understand. Wait, I need to, okay, hold on. Let me interact. Let me struggle with this. Okay. Having your students choose, having your students have a voice in their education to say, okay, well, we're learning this, but I just didn't get it. Okay, then what can you, don't come ask me, what can you do to get it? What resources do you have to get it? What previous knowledge do you, because that's how we learn stuff. Think about us as teachers. We can go to 1,000 professional developments, but we really learn it outside of the PD. We really learn it when we're at home going, where did she say to click? Oh, okay. Right? We learn through our mistakes. And then connect content to students' lives, but also think about positive references. So if you are going to teach a historical event that, is a Debbie Downer, if you are going to teach a historical event that's depressing, you also want to think of positive references about those people. So, for example, if you were teaching American slavery, well, why not also talk about African heroes, African kings and queens, how not to take the whole continent of Africa and think it's a country, and talk about the different countries in, like just stuff like that. Like, start pulling out those positive references too, to kind of counteract, because we don't want to not teach the historical event, because that's why we're going through, some of the same stuff over and over again, because we stopped teaching the historical event because we don't want to be depressed. But you know what? It happens. So we can't stop teaching it, but we also want to bring some of those positive influences of affirmation into it as well. And last but not least, developing cultural competence. So I'm going to leave this up, and I want to see some of the comments that we have going on. Let's see. The student must be learning process and built up their confidence even when the learning became challenging. These practices help my students say, I think I can, rather than I can't. Love it. Appreciation of the past and background. Love. Teacher biases reflect social messages from co-teachers, parents, and administrators. Disciplinary actions are likely perpetrated against minorities, against those who cannot defend themselves because of their status. Have academic success made me reminisce my former students who excel well in math. Miss them much. Oh. Self-fulfilling prophecy. It is a scrutable phenomenon, and I've read some journals stating that it affects a student a ton. And I'm sorry, my eyes are horrible. And last one I'll read, students must be given an opportunity to explore what socialization processes may have led them to think a certain way about the issue at hand and breaking free of those subconscious ideas. Oh my, again, I want that on a t-shirt. I want it on a t-shirt for everybody, not just students. Like I need adults to do that too, right? Why do I think the way that I think? Where did that thought come from? Why? And all of us, like not just, oh, we're racist people. No, all of us need to think like, why is this the norm? Why is this the status quo? Right? When you think about the canon is the canon because we say it's the canon and we keep saying it's the canon. So it's like, why am I thinking that way? Love it. Keep those comments coming. All right. Developing cultural competence. So finding out who your students are and what is important to them and their families and cultures. Okay, so first of all, you're not going to know how to research their cultures and if you don't know who they are, especially if you just look at them and think, oh, Black, Filipino, Asian, white, mixed, right? Like you don't know. You don't know. So you want to learn about your students, learn about their cultures. Always find it really interesting how we say we want to learn stuff, but we never ask. And I'm like, okay, ask them. like even when we talk about motivation, oh, I wonder what's going to motivate my teachers. Ask them. Okay. But learning what's important and then tapping that student's knowledge and validating it by using it in the lesson. So I had a student who loved fishing. He was just a fishing fool. And we were reading a story and it had a fish in it. It wasn't even really about fishing, but it had a fish in it. And I was like, hey, is this real? Would this really happen with it? And he just lit up and was like, well, and just completely tapped into his previous knowledge. He was all into the book after that, even though the book was not about fishing. But it's just the fact that I validated his previous knowledge, right? And you would hope that I wouldn't have to do that he would already be validated, but we're also living in the real world, right? And our students are dumped on enough. We as adults are dumped on enough to think that we're not valid, right? We have that imposter syndrome that everyone else is better and everyone's culture is better. And but if it's talked about in school, it must be important, right? Those little like the person said, like those little things of like, why do we think this way, right? But that's how we think. Like if it's mentioned in school or if it's on a test or if it's in a book, it must be important. So me just asking him to bring that previous knowledge to it validated it and validated him. And it was such a small thing. It didn't take wasn't in my lesson plan but I knew my student, so I was able to do that. And then, and was I like perfect? No, I wasn't perfect all the time. And I didn't know every student to the same level of, so you do the best you can and you always re-examine to say, how can I get better? And that's what the last bullet is. Constantly re-examine your students. I have teachers at the beginning of the year, they're like, okay, well, I know my students. Are your students not growing? Are they not changing throughout the year? If they're not, you need to question, what am I doing in the classroom? Okay, if they come in on day one and they leave on day 110 the same way, something is wrong. So you need to constantly re-examine, constantly build that relationship. It's a constant thing. It's not, just like this. It's a journey. It's not a destination. So constantly re-examining your students' lives and their cultures and their families and what's important to them, and trying to include that into your lesson. It doesn't mean that you have to change what you're teaching, because a lot of us can't, right? We have steady curriculums. But if you can choose resources that fit with your students' lives, and then bring them beyond. Because we also have to learn about people that we don't meet in our classrooms. But that's at least a place to start, is to make sure that all of your students are represented in the resources that you use, but then bring them beyond, right? If I have a classroom of 30 Black students, yes, they need to be represented, but I also need to bring them beyond. I need to show them other cultures. I need to show them other religions. That's what's going to normalize everyone. And then we won't be looking saying, you're the other, you're different. Because, oh yeah, I read a story. Yes, I read a story about your culture. Is this really true? Or, so it normalizes. And that's what we need. We need way more of that in our educational system. So thank you so much. You don't have to do this, but thank you so much for this discussion. And I want to see if we have any questions, look at comments, and see where our discussion takes us for the rest of our time.
Hello, Dr. Alexander. Thank you so much for that, no, for that very intense, no, and actually I can really feel the emotions, Dr. Alexander, all throughout your presentation. Okay, and of course, I hope that you also see, no, how intense and how invested our teachers are in the comment section. I think we have an entire new other discussion happening in our chat section, no?
That's
And
what I
thank you
wanted.
so for. Yes, no, for engaging, of course, our speaker for today. Okay, so teachers, we now have some time for questions kay Dr. Alexander, no, regarding what we are talking about today. But maybe before, while as to start, no, Dr. Alexander, while we're waiting for some questions in the chat, although we already have one question, okay, let's first entertain this one. This is from teacher Lord Lena. Okay, how do you develop cultural competence in the academe or workplace?
I think it really depends on the workplace and the workplace culture, because it's really, in my opinion, it's conversational based. So if I want to know more about you, I want to know more about your culture, I want to know more about just your life, then I'm gonna strike up conversations with you. Now, when I say that, I don't mean I'm going to interview you. Okay, so I'm not gonna be like, okay, so what's your culture? What do you like? What is this? What racism do you get? What did it? No, it's not an interview, because I'm not here to teach you, right? But it's building those relationships with people that are not like yourself, and saying, hey, I want to learn just more about you as a person, and then that's going to lead to me learning more about your culture. And if I do learn that, okay, so you are an atheist, okay, so I can go do some research on my own about that and go, oh well, let me see what and then if I have a question, I may say, is it okay that I ask you a question? Because you don't want to just assume like, hey, you're my atheist friend, so I'm going to ask you about. No, is it okay that I ask you a question? And if they go, nah, I can't really take that right now, I'll be like, okay, got it, move on. But it's building those relationships in the workplace, I think, is gonna help.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Alexander, for that. Okay, this one is on when it comes to like really quantifying this equitable or concept of equity in education, the question is from teacher Arnold Baldo. Can we include biases or like these concepts, no, in assessments, okay, so that we can actually quantify and really assess if these are things that our students are acquiring in school?
Yes. Assessments are one of those things that we lie to ourselves about. And it's just the truth. Like we always say, assessment is objective. It's not. It's not. Assessments are very subjective. Even if you have a rubric, it's still my lens that I'm using on the so it's the assessment is very, very subjective. So definitely looking at your biases, whether it's biases or whether it's just do you like that student? Because let's be real, that's what happens, right? The student made you mad that day, and suddenly their rubric is a little bit lower than it would have been. So, just looking at us as humans and going, hey, okay, am I actually assessing this student the way I'm assessing all students? Do I have bias in a good or bad way? Like, am I saying like, oh well, this just happened in that student's life, so I'm gonna give them a little bump in the assessment? So just it's so subjective, but we want to act like none of that exists, right? Like, no, assessments are very objective and that's the way to go. So what I told my teachers even during the pandemic is we need to rethink assessments and rethink the way we assess assessments. So not only rethink like, are we actually getting to understand what the students learn or what they have learned, or are we so stuck in the format of our assessments that we never quite get to see, did they learn anything? One of the awesome things, I did not use it in my classroom, but I thought I learned about it later, is the teacher gave like an ABC test. And then the last question was, tell me anything else that you know about this topic. And I was like, oh, what an awesome way to say, like, you may not fit into ABC, but you may know all this other stuff about the topic that I taught or that you did read. I was like, what an awesome way to get to what we really want to know, which is, did you learn what I taught you? So that's my answer to that. There's absolutely biases in assessments. There's a biases in how the questions are written. There's biases in the ways and formats that we ask it back from students. That's why I like choice boards so much, where students can choose how they show you that they've learned it, so they can use their previous skills and create a Minecraft game. And so they're like, I have skills, but you never test me on those skills, right? You never asked for that because it's not validated. So that'll be my answer for that.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander, for that. No. This one is from teacher Mia May Kibuyan, and she's asking about how to be culturally and linguistically responsive, especially in the context of the pandemic.
um I think it's the same ways that we just talked about, honestly. Whether you are virtually, whether you're in person, it's building those relationships are everything in education. So whether, like I said, whether you're doing it virtually, in person, behind masks, behind windows, it's still about building those. We can't lose the building relationships with our students. Yeah, so that's what like everything that we talked about still goes into being culturally and linguistically responsive.
Thank you for that, Dr. Alexander. I have two questions, no, from my end, naman. And my first question is, Dr. Alexander, just to give you a context, no, especially during the start of our discussion, actually, some teachers are very, in a way, uncomfortable or hesitant on this discussion because this is something that hits very hard here in the Philippines. No, we know that it exists, biases, discriminations, okay, most especially, for example, in our cases of our ethno-linguistic groups in the Philippines, the indigenous groups in the Philippines, they are mostly the marginalized sector of our community here, as, that also includes in education. and it's very young. We are in an infant stage now when we're talking about the equity cycle. So if there's any suggestion, Dr. Alexander, as the Filipino educators gets into this no deeper.
Oh, I think you froze, if you can hear me. So I think Franco froze, so he'll probably be coming on back with us. Let me see if we have. Okay, let me see. Okay, just seeing if we have any questions. Yeah, he said he had signal loss. So let's
Hello,
see if we have.
Dr. Alexander. Sorry
Oh,
for that. Can
hey.
you hear me now?
Yes.
I think yeah, I froze. No, I just lost my signal. No, internet connection. But anyway, as I was asking, what would be that very crucial step that Filipino educators or school institutions should take in order to usher no these discussions, programs, and maybe projects that has something to do with equity cycle?
I think the first thing is to dedicate time to it. This is not going to be something that you can have one PD on and be like, okay, we're done. You're going to have, just like the issue is a continuous issue, the solution is going to be continuous. So I think dedicating time to talking about the issue, dedicating time into saying, why do we have these systems? Why is this group marginalized? Like, why? What is the history behind it? How do we as an educational system perpetuate that? Right? How do we keep that going? How are we teaching the status quo? Right? But I think the main thing is to dedicate the time and make it important. So just like we make curriculum important, just like we make assessments important, we have to make the discussion on this important and create those brave spaces.
Yes, I love that. That's the reason why I really love the idea of brave space, Dr. Alexander. Maybe last question, Dr. Alexander, still in relation to brave space, because here in the Filipinos, okay, culturally, are non-confrontational. And we know that this topic requires confrontations. It requires brave discussions on the idea of equity. So there's a question from teacher Manolita White that talks about this, okay? Wherein she's asking, no, Filipinos find difficult to say no or disagree, reject or be confrontational, especially when a superior is involved. How can we address this kind of toxic culture on a way non-confrontational aspect of Filipino culture?
So I would say, because I don't think it's comfortable. I understand that is a cultural trait. I don't think it's comfortable for anyone though. So it's one of those things that you want to think about. We're not going to be confrontational. We're going to have difficult conversations. So it's not, being like, I dare, you can go that route, but it's not about being confrontational, but it is about saying, okay, we don't even, I don't, can we talk about what was said? Can we have a closed door meeting about, what was said, or, how that, what was done, or how that policy is going to continue to marginalize this other group. So it doesn't have to be confrontational. You want to think about it as, I just need to have a conversation with you about it. Because it's not sitting right with me. So I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say you better do this. And no, it's just like, hey, can we have a conversation about what just happened? And the thing is, especially when you're talking about a superior, is you're going to have to know when to cut your losses, right? So when you're talking, if they're like, no, 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 okay, cutting my, like, I still need my job. So you're going to have to know when to, cut your losses and go, well, you know what? I'm going to do what I can do in my role, to be a better representation of this company, even if you're not going to. So don't think about it as a confrontation. Think about it as, okay, I just want to have a conversation about what just happened. And then trying to go from there.
Thank you for that, no, Dr. Alexander. And unfortunately, teachers, that's the only time that we have. We don't want to stretch the session further. Okay? Of course, no, we also respect time of Dr. Alexander. Anyway, we've answered some of the questions. Please do keep them coming. No, of course, we're still going to address them in the next few sessions here at Kaagapay Teacher Support. Okay. So teachers, let's now send our warmest, no, actually, since it's very hot in the Philippines, our hottest regards, okay, and appreciation to Dr. Alexander, okay, for spending her time. No, it's 2 a.m. already, maybe 3 a.m. In her side, and we appreciate the time for being with us, no, Dr. Alexander. Okay, so teachers, let's send our thanks, no, in the chat so that our Dr. Alexander would feel that much needed, that much I don't know, warmth from the Filipino community. Okay. And of course, we still want to show further appreciation by presenting this certificate of appreciation, Dr. Alexander Kim. This certificate of appreciation is awarded to Dr. Alexander for sharing her knowledge and expertise in the recently concluded webinar entitled Equity in Education, Kim, awarded on March 19, 2022, to be signed by your administrators, Angelo B. Malyari, Joseph Angelo M. Santos, Kim Paula May J. Mendoza, and Franco Nicolo T. Adwood. Okay, so once again, Dr. Alexander, thank you so much. Okay, may we just request before we say goodbye, Dr. Alexander, just a short message to our Filipino community, Filipino educators, because right now, Dr. Alexander, we are starting to go back on a face-to-face, in-person teaching.
And what is the short message about? I'm sorry.
Just maybe a message of encouragement or reminders for teachers who are now going to go back in an in-person teaching.
So I would say to remember that if you're nervous about going back into the classroom, if you are anxious, if you are excited, your students are also bringing all of those emotions with them. So definitely have empathy, understand that y'all are going to work through it together and have those conversations with them. The more you open up and say, hey, we're going to figure this out together, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to have, great times, we're going to have some times that, we're so used to being at home that we don't want to come to this building, and just, work through it and have grace and mercy together.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. And again, amazing session. And please stay safe, Dr. Alexander. We wish you all the best as well for all your undertakings.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Dr. Alexander. Okay, so teachers, okay, thank you so much once again for joining us in this session for today. No, amazing session. I really always love the energy by Dr. Alexander. It doesn't seem like it's 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning on her side. She always brings that morning energy, in our sessions, and that's one of the things I really love about Dr. Alexander. Plus, again, the passion and enthusiasm that Dr. Alexander always bring to our community. So again, let's continue sharing our insights, no, and of course appreciation to Dr. Alexander in the chat, teachers, no, so that she may read them, okay, and would feel, no, the warmth of Filipino educators, Filipino community in general. Okay, so teachers, let's now proceed. No, I'll just would like to invite you, no, on our sixth installment of our March series that will be on March 24. That's going to be Thursday next week, 2022, no, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. That will be the top 5 shifts in education. Ano nga ba ang nangyayari ngayon sa mundo, no, when it comes to education? Okay, and we'll try to discuss that, no, on Thursday together with our speaker, Miss Stephanie Howell from the US. Okay, so we'll definitely another great session coming up on Thursday, teachers. Okay, so please be there, no, and yes, thank you also, Teacher Lord Lennon, for all your insights and questions. Okay, so teachers, okay, we'll now proceed with our evaluation. Please evaluate this session here for you to be able to also get your certificates. Okay, as I mentioned, teachers, no, thank you to Teacher Ronnie, okay, for his suggestion, okay. Couple of things that will change in our next series in April is that number one, okay, there will be now a registration for our April series, okay, for the series itself. No, there will be no registration per event, but for the series, okay. Why is that? So that you'll receive a invitation letter to the entire series, okay. So just in case you need to request for an SO or a special order, you'll be able to do so, no, very quickly from your supervisors. Okay, so that's where what we're going to adjust as well. Okay, so yan, maraming salamat teachers. No, please do let me know if the link is working and you can access our evaluation link. No, again, thank you so much. Yan, si Teacher Ronnie Edian. Okay. Yes, no, Teacher Lord Lena, sorry, nagkaroon lang tayo ng delay, no, pero ano na, naka-plot na po yung ating CPD units application, okay? And we'll just make sure that our first CPD event, teachers, no, is worth 15 sorry, 10 to 15 CPD points para malaki na kagad yung makukuha yung CPD points from Kaagapay Teacher Support. So, abang lang po, Teacher Lord Lena, parating na po yan, okay? Ano na, naka-apply naman na yun, nakaayos na yung documents, no? We're just preparing all other things, no, for the application process. Okay, so just be patient. We'll be there soon, Teacher Lorden. Thank you so much, teachers, for confirming it's working. So again, maraming salamat. See you on Thursday, teachers, okay, for our 7th and our 8th installment of our March series. Okay? Teacher Lord Lena, don't worry. Okay, what's going to happen is that kapag naayos natin yung April, okay, the commitment will be there will be one CPD accredited event per month for the entire 2022. We're just polishing our protocols, okay? And of course, try naming alamin, no, yung process of applying for CPD events, okay? Pero hanggang bago kayo mag-apply, no, for your licenses, no, come December 31, 2022, mababayaran natin yung lahat ng utang na CPD points natin. Okay? So that's a promise, Teacher Lord Lena. Don't worry. Okay? We'll be there. Okay? We'll be there. As always. Okay? And we're committed to do that. Okay? Yes, maraming salamat, teachers, and we'll see you po, no, on Thursday. Okay, paalam po. Please stay negative from COVID-19, teachers, okay? But please stay positive in life. Stay safe, no, and laban lang, teachers, always. Okay? Paalam po.